Welcome back to another episode of Solo Leveling. Please like the video and subscribe. Episode 160 begins with people watching the battle between the monarchs from all around the world as it was being live-streamed. Meanwhile, the city turned into a battlefield as all of them collided, destroying everything in the vicinity. Leonard was watching their battle from a distance in horror. Thomas was also regaining consciousness after being healed and asked Leonard about the situation. Leonard tells him, "It's like I'm witnessing the end of the world." Beck was also watching the battle, wondering if this was the same Jinwoo they knew. He comments that he knows Jinwoo has the ability to grow stronger, but just how much stronger did he become in such a short amount of time? While on the battlefield, Jinwoo, along with the soldiers, began to overpower all the monarchs, and they struggled to keep up with their regeneration. Croatia was getting furious as Baru overpowered her and decided to finish him off. But before she could do that, Jinwoo approached her, saying, "The architect told me a prophecy that I would die from the pillar of flames that holds up the world, but he didn't tell me whether that pillar will actually fall or not." From a distance, the Fiend Guild Master, Lim, was also watching the battle from atop a building. He comments, "I've been standing by for a long time so I could snipe, but I don't think this is a fight I can interfere in." 30 minutes ago, the elite assassins of the Fiend Guild had been dispatched all over the buildings around the area to provide support fire when given the signal. He thinks, when we do that, how many of us will survive? And if we fail, all of us might die, as even Thomas Andre wasn't able to subdue those monsters. It's about time for us to make decisions. And as he was thinking, a hand reached out to him from the back, telling him to just sit back and watch. He turns toward the person, asking for their identity, but is stunned to see who the person was. Meanwhile, of all the hunters that had gathered to subjugate the magic beasts, not a single one of them was able to interfere with the ongoing fight. They were simply waiting for everything to be situated. Back in the fight, Jinwoo managed to land a solid hit on Croatia, but that wasn't enough to take out the Queen of Insects. She started to regenerate, and she attacked Jinwoo using poison. A notification opened up, stating that the venom effects were still present in the atmosphere. Jinwoo tells her, "Poison won't work on me." Seeing this, Croatia was enraged and started to charge toward Jinwoo, saying, "I will rip you apart into pieces." But before she could finish her sentence, she felt something and figured out it was Jinwoo as he was pulling her toward himself. Seeing this, she thought, an overwhelming authority. "I can't undo it." As she was pinned to the ground, Jinwoo used mutilation, directly hitting Croatia, and she started to disintegrate in the air. In her final moments, she said, "So this must be death, a heavy darkness that humbles even us who were created from darkness." And she disappears into the air. Jinwoo received a notification telling him that he had defeated Croatia, the monarch of plagues. Seeing this, Silid was in disbelief, saying, "How is this possible? He shouldn't be able to use the Shadow Monarch's power to its full extent yet." He asks Rakan, "So we will experience it again?" Fear toward one of the strongest monarchs. Rakan tells him not to worry, as he is exhausted. Grabbing Baru by his neck, he says, "The fact that he's relying on these small fries implies that he is still incomplete. An incomplete monarch can't get in the way of true monarchs." As he was starting to crush Baru, Jinwoo noticed that Baru's existence was fading and wondered if this was how he managed to get rid of the shadow placed on him by Thomas Andre. Panicking, Jinwoo tries to cancel the summon, ordering Baru to come back, but is horrified to see a notification telling him, "You cannot retract the specified subject." He jumps in to attack Rakan himself, saving Baru in the process. As he was putting Baru back, he thought, "I managed to avoid Baru from being extinguished." However, he looks at Silid, who was saying, "King of Beasts, you are right." Silid covers an enormous amount of area in ice, fully transforms, and tells Jinwoo, "You are confident in your powers in controlling puppets like these, so we simply need to cut the strings so you can't control them anymore. I will trap the puppets under my authority and make them go through healing and resurrection over and over again. Then your soldiers will be nothing but parasites that eat away at your mana." He attacks Jinwoo, saying, "What will you do now?" Scylla manages to injure Jinwoo's arm and, using his strength, lifts him into the air and slams him to the ground, thinking he's not there yet. But Jinwoo leaps out from the rubble and attacks him. Scylla dodges and strikes back with such force that Jinwoo gets launched back. He manages to land on his feet, thinking he's fast. Looking at his condition, Scylla says, "Your stealth skill must have a heavy mana consumption," and leaps toward Jinwoo, saying, "I will put an end to this quickly." They start exchanging blows, and as they fight, Jinwoo thinks, "I can see all his movements, but if only I could be faster than him, just a little bit." Looking at him, Scylla tells him, "I don't know what you are plotting, but it's no use," and attacks using his ice magic. But by that time, Jinwoo was already behind him, saying, "I got him." He sees Scylla smirking and senses something. Everyone else was also horrified to see that Rockin, from the back, managed to sneak up on Jinwoo, piercing through his chest. He tells Jinwoo, "I guess you're nothing without the speed you're so confident in." Jinwoo looks down at his claws as his weapons fall to the ground. He thinks, "My level increased, so this much is nothing." Scylla picks up his dagger, stabbing Jinwoo, saying, "I will return your weapon to you," and asks, "Can you heal like you did earlier?" Jinwoo tells him, "Probably not. No matter how strong you are, you're not a complete monarch." He asks him, "Is this as far as you can go, human? If that is the case, you will not be able to witness the moment our armies set foot in this world. When that happens, there will be a mountain of human corpses, and their blood will form endless rivers. But this country, which you grew up in, will be different. I shall personally freeze every single human in this country myself and make them suffer through an eternal agony. They will have to live through an eternity, not being able to die nor live. So show me your endless contempt for me within your death. That will also be part of my joy." As Jinwoo was being frozen, he thought, "I need to hold on for just a little more." A notification opened up, telling him that his HP had reached 0 and the player had died. But another notification showed up, telling him that the player was in possession of the Black Heart and had met all the requirements for a passive skill, which had been activated. The screen filled up with a bright light. After that, Jinwoo woke up. He sat up, panicking, thinking about his fight with the Monarchs. He wondered if all of that had been a dream and thought that he was certain the ice dagger had pierced through his heart. He wondered how he was still alive, that as he was thinking, Woo, along with another man, entered the room, asking Jinwoo if he had come back to his senses. Seeing him, Jinwoo was surprised and asked, "What happened to those monarchs?" Calling him the chairman, and asked, "How are you still alive?" Hearing that, Woo was surprised and told Jinwoo there were 3 things he should tell him. Firstly, I am not the chairman, but the chief inspector of the surveillance team. Secondly, I would like to ask you about the moving statues. And third, how do you know who I am? Jinwoo wasn't able to process what he was talking about. Woo tells him that when they arrived at the site with the White Tigers Guild, it was already over. Jinwoo tells him, "That's not what I was talking about." Seeing this situation, Jinwoo realizes that he has somehow traveled back in time. Looking at his condition, Woo asks if he's alright. Jinwoo tells him he needs time to rearrange his thoughts as he walks out of the hospital, that he looks at his stats and items in his inventory, thinking everything is the same as before. Even at Kamish Wrath, as he was thinking, he heard a voice asking why he was not resting. It was Jaina, who asked him if he hurt his head too in the dungeon. Looking at his appearance, she wondered if she came into the wrong room and asked him, "Who are you?" Jinwoo thought, "I guess she can't recognize me because I gradually changed into my current looks back then." He asked her, "Can you really not recognize your older brother?" She asks him, "Are you sure you're my older brother? I feel like you've become different, and you've grown quite a bit as well." Jinwoo, ignoring the question, tells her, "It's probably your feeling." He starts to walk away, saying, "I'm a little busy. I need to head to the Hunters Association." She asks him the reason for doing that, and Jinwoo tells her he needs to inform them that he's giving up being a hunter that he asks her to return to school, saying, "I know you came over while in the middle of class." Turning toward Han Song-yi, he tells her, "Don't ever think about giving up on studying to become a hunter." She was surprised, wondering how he knew her name. He puts on his hood, thinking, "I don't have my shadow soldiers, so I just need to rebuild my army," and wonders, how could this be happening? He arrives at the association building to have his rank reevaluated, and the men talk about how he's the first S rank in 2 years. They tell him their device can't measure his magic power. Jinwoo tells them, "Before we do it again, I would like to meet the chairman." The men tell him they will guide him to his room, and he starts to walk away, saying, "I already know where it is." Seeing him go, they wonder how an outsider like him knows where the chairman's room is. Going up the elevator, he sees another man standing with him, thinking, "What kind of scenario should I make up today? It's not my first time making up lies to the association, and if I get caught by Chief Inspector Wu, I'd be in big trouble." He hears Jinwoo saying, "You possess a stealth skill, and yet you haven't reported about the fact." Hearing that, the man starts to reach for his weapon, saying, "How do you know that?" Jinwoo tells him, "Someone will ask you to avenge their daughter for them." He says, "I'm not interested in what you do with criminals, but if you hurt innocent hunters during that incident, you will die by my hands." Seeing his weapons in his hands, the man is stunned, and Jinwoo tells him, "You only get one warning." As Jinwoo entered the chairman's office, his eyes widened, and he said, "It's been forever since I last saw him." He saw Chairman Go-Gun, he's sitting in front of him. Seeing him, the chairman says, "Seeing how you came to look for me as soon as you got back your test results, I assume you were somewhat familiar with the procedures." Seeing Jinwoo emotional, he asks him, "Are you alright?" Jinwoo tells him, "It's nothing." As they sit down, the chairman tells Jinwoo, "I will get straight to the point," and Jinwoo stops him, saying, "There is a deal I would like to tell you about." He asks the chairman to change the regulations so that even summoned creatures can be counted as raid members by the association, proposing that if the chairman does that, he would go to Jeju Island and rid it of the ant monsters. The chairman, shocked after hearing that, tells Jinwoo not to say something so ridiculous, reminding him how many times they have failed on the Jeju Island raid already. But as he looks at Jinwoo, he senses an overwhelming amount of mana. Jinwoo tells him, "It's something only I can accomplish," and assures him that he will take care of the ants on the island. The chairman was left speechless, thinking Jinwoo possessed a power that far exceeded that of a national-level hunter. After that, Jinwoo goes through all the adventures again, from saving Lee Ju-hee to his first Red Gate incident. He defeats the High Orcs, turns Tusk into a shadow soldier, saves his mother from eternal slumber, and finally makes his way to Jeju Island, where he turns Baru into a shadow soldier, along with all the insect monsters that were inhabiting the island. And that is where he realizes something and asks, "Why don't you stop this?" He shouts, "I know all of this is an illusion, so stop this charade and reveal yourself. How much longer are you planning to look down on me from above?" As he stands there, looking above, the illusion stops, and he gets surrounded by notifications, asking if he wants to restart the world. Seeing this, Jinwoo asks for the identity of the entity, and as the one responsible appears, Jinwoo recognizes him as the king of the dead, that he asks Jinwoo, "If you wanted, you could live in this world for eternity. It would be like never waking up from the most wonderful dream." Hearing that, Jinwoo asks, "Are you telling me to be trapped within this illusion you've created?" The king replies, "No, I did not create this world. You are responsible for its creation." He explains, "It's a world created by combining your desire to correct your mistakes up until now, together with my power. In other words, this is my territory. This is the eternal rest. This is death." He tells Jinwoo, "I have been watching you for far longer than you could possibly imagine. You, who have always been closer than anyone to death, yet so desperately resisting against it. I am the record of your struggles, the evidence of your resistance, and the reward of your suffering. I am death. I am eternal rest, as well as terror. I am you, and within my territory, you're able to do anything you want." You are able to turn my servants into yours and absorb my power from them. Although it is only possible within your own territory, the power to create, destroy, and change the world." Hearing all that, Jinwoo asks, "Are you saying that you and I possess the same power?" The king tells Jinwoo, "I've been waiting for the day we finally meet for a very long time now." He says, "I am the Shadow Monarch and the administrator of the deepest part of the darkness." Jinwoo asks, "Why was I chosen?" The monarch replies, "I shall show you our beginning and end, and also your beginning." And the story shifts back to the city where Jinwoo was fighting the monarchs. Looking at him, Rakan tells Sillid, he's dead for sure. Leonard also tells Thomas the same thing, that Jinwoo's presence disappeared just now. Hearing that, Beck says, "That's impossible. So now, there isn't anyone who can stop those magical beasts." Lim, from the top of the building, thinks, "I shouldn't have listened to that person earlier." He wonders if they can stop the creatures by bombarding them right now and decides to attack, instructing his hunters to prepare to fire. "We will fire at once with my signal. Our target is that magical beast who looks like a White Walker." As he was preparing to attack, Jinwoo started to emit massive amounts of mana, shocking Sillid. He saw his black heart burning with dark flame. Seeing this, both Sillid and Rakan realize something and charge toward Jinwoo, saying, "We must stop the true king from descending after the fake king has died." As they both get close, Rakan gets kicked in the face by someone and hits Sillid. They both go flying into a nearby building. The man stands in front of Jinwoo, who is still inside the prison that Sillid made, and he tells both of them, "None shall touch this child." And we see the history of the Shadow Monarch that in the distant past, an absolute split the light and dark to create his emissaries. From the light and from the dark, he created the 8 sovereigns. Emissaries were born to maintain the world, and the sovereigns were born to destroy the world. Both factions continuously killed each other, but fatigued by the constant and unending war, the brightest fragment of brilliant light asked the Absolute why he was ignoring the screams of the countless soldiers dying for him, and asked for him to lend them his strength so they could fight in his honor. But the Absolute being did not reply back to the fragment, and at that moment, the fragment of brilliant light realized that to the Absolute, the battle between themselves and the sovereigns was nothing more than a form of entertainment, and he did not want the war to end. They learned that even if they abided by the law of the Absolute, only death awaited them. As long as the Absolute existed, the war would never end. And to end this meaningless war, they unsheathed their blades. It was the start of the rebellion. The monarch points, saying, "That is me from the distant past." He tells Jinwoo, "I was the sole emissary who stood up against the rebellion of the other emissaries. But my pitiful number of soldiers powerlessly fell before the united armies of the emissaries. And when I thought it was the end, I reopened my eyes within the darkness and realized that the Absolute had hidden a certain power inside me. And on that day, the Shadow Monarch was born. Using his powers, he resurrected the defeated armies and led them to the battlefront. However, when he returned, everything was already over. The remaining fragments of brilliant light had killed the Absolute being and called themselves the new rulers. Using various tools containing the power of the Absolute being, they hunted down the sovereigns. As a result, the king of giants, Legia, was captured by the rulers, and the power balance between the two sides collapsed. That he tells Jinwoo that the sovereigns realized the severity of the situation, and I used that moment to reach out to them. They had no choice but to combine forces with me in order to combat our common enemy, the rulers. From then on, I continued the long-lasting battle as neither a fragment of brilliant light nor an emissary of the Absolute, but as the Shadow Monarch, that I strengthened my army by gathering soldiers that remained on the battlefield. And when I combined forces with the army of destruction led by the king of berserk dragons, the monarchs as well as the rulers came to fear me. 2 of the monarchs, who feared me, aimed for my back after combining forces, and due to that, my shadow army was nearly annihilated. and the strength that was too powerful brought me betrayal. While the king of the beasts, the beast monarch, ran away after abandoning his soldiers, the king of the demons, the monarch of white flames, Baron, had to pay the ultimate price. But then, the rulers started to descend from the sky. They surrounded the shadow monarch, kneeled in front of him, and asked for his forgiveness, saying, "There is no reason for us to fight any longer." Even though they possessed enough power to send me back to nothingness if they wanted to, they chose to pursue peace. It was the least respect they could have shown me for the time I was their ally, fighting on the front lines while leading the army of brilliant light. Hearing their apology, the shadow monarch asks them, "Have you not harmed my liege with your swords and spears?" And they tell him, he was also their master. Hearing that, the shadow monarch gets furious and tells them, "This is precisely why your crimes are even more heinous." The fragment tells him, "You should understand better than anyone how we felt when we raised our banners of rebellion against our master. We simply wanted to end this war." Hearing this, the shadow monarch tells them, "Pierce my heart with your spear. This is the end that you so desperately seek. You shall finally become the victors of this war." But the fragments asked him once more to find it in his heart to forgive them as all of the armies surround him, showing him their respect. The shadow monarch tells Jinwoo that he was overwhelmed and was unable to come up with any kind of solution, so I decided to hide for the sake of revenge. Since I had trapped the monarch of white flames within me, I was planning on striking the forces of the beast monarch after letting my body recover. But while I was hiding, the monarchs who lost the majority of their power had been defeated by the rulers. And when I reappeared in front of the monarchs who took their chances to escape to the cracks between the dimensions, the king of dragons did not permit any kind of fight, knowing that it was time for them to recover their strength. And as such, he gladly allowed me to join his forces that we went searching for a new world for the sake of building up our new army. Hearing all of that, Jinwoo asks, "Is it Earth you're talking about?" The shadow monarch tells him, "Yes, that is correct," and shows Jinwoo the destroyed cities. He thinks, "I've seen this scene before. This is the demon castle," and asks, "Is this what will happen in the future?" And the monarch tells him, "This is a recording of the past." Hearing that, Jinwoo asks, what was he talking about? He explains that in the past, the rulers were late to detect the movements of the sovereigns, and by the time they arrived, everything had come to an end. By then, the rulers grew angry that the army of the chaos world, which they failed to eradicate, managed to bring destruction upon another world. So in order to correct this, they used their tool containing the power of the Absolute, which they had prohibited themselves from using, the tool called the Cup of Reincarnation. It had the ability to turn back time by 10 years. The rulers used everything they had in order to save this world, but the current Earth was way too weak to fight against the monarchs. Whether the monarchs or the rulers won the battle, the impact brought upon this planet would remain the same. So the rulers made a drastic decision. If they couldn't save everyone, they wanted to make sure that at least some would survive, so those people could continue on in this world. Jinwoo asks, "Is that why the hunters were created?" He explains that they were making human beings capable of surviving the collision between the two forces. The rulers wanted the humans to survive no matter what they had to do. Jinwoo thinks the Demon King is a fragment of memories left behind by the Shadow Monarch and asks, "Has this world already gone through countless annihilations?" He replies, "Indeed. Although the higher beings are not able to go against the flow of time, they're able to perceive the change in the flow of time created by the Cup of Reincarnation." He tells Jinwoo, now the cup was unusable. Jinwoo, surprised, asks, "How is that possible?" He tells Jinwoo that the cup did not possess infinite power. Just like the Absolute, who was eliminated by his own creations, there is a limit to every power. Jinwoo asks, "How are the creations able to kill the Absolute?" He explains it's no different from humans dying from machines they had created. We were created to fight, and our powers were more than enough to bring down our own creator. He goes on to say that the sovereigns utilized the rulers' methods to create a plan of their own. similar to how the rulers lent power to humans so they could kill magical beasts, strengthening the world. The sovereigns would also borrow a human body to descend onto the world and bring their armies far earlier than the expectations of the rulers. They planned to use the magical energy that was spread around the planet by the rulers to turn the entirety of Earth into one large trap. In order for them to cross over into this world, they needed a host body who was able to handle their power. But because I and the Monarch of Destruction possess powers too great, we could not find humans who were suitable to be our hosts. At that time, one of the most capable mages working under a king came to me with a proposal. They were willing to find me a suitable human. That mage, called the Architect, asserted that they would give me assistance, but only for an imperishable body in return. But unfortunately, no living thing could become a vessel to contain death. The Architect used the system that he designed to search for one talented in sensing magic power, one with prodigal physical power, one with superiority, one with great mentality. He searched for a human whose strength would meet my power, and so he found someone who bested his system, someone who rewrote the rules of his game and exceeded his expectations. It was you, who was always weak, always closest to death, and yet evaded death again and again. I watched you, and even in opposition to the Architect, I picked you. So I shall say it once more. I am the record of your struggles, the evidence of your resistance, and the reward of your pain. Hearing all that, Jinwoo asks him, even though I had exceeded the Architect's expectations, I must not have been enough to be able to handle your power? He explains, the Architect used objects of human skill and human preferences to adjust to my strength. He used games and recreations to fuel your amusement. The Architect system, which used my power, transformed your body level by level to match mine. Jinwoo asks, why did you betray the Architect?
The monarchs tell him, it was because that place did not offer a place for me. Hearing that, Jinwoo tells him, my answer is the same. This is not a place where I should be. Hearing his answer, the monarch gets happy as he walks away. Jinwoo asks, is this the last time I will be seeing you? He tells Jinwoo, I will return to rest, but you, the Shadow Monarch, will live an imperishable life. Thus, the crossing of our paths is quite unlikely. With death, your power has become absolute. The way to go back is, before he could finish, Jinwoo tells him, I know. The Shadow Monarch tells him, because I am you.
Scene shift and Sillid and Rockin witnessing the rebirth of Jinwoo, they ask the man calling him a fragment of brilliant light that the worst disaster is coming from the body of the human you are trying to protect. Are you really trying to bring disaster upon this world by your own hands? Are you really risking your life to aid the Shadow Monarch's revival? Just what are you traitors thinking? Rockin tells Sillid that we don't have much time, and he prepares to stop Jinwoo from gaining his full power. And seeing this, the man also prepares to fight to buy time for Jinwoo to recover. And with lightning-fast speed, all of them charge toward each other as the fight begins. Sillid closes in and attacks the fragment using his trident, but he was too fast and managed to dodge the strike, and from the above he sees Rockin's claw coming straight towards him. And before his attack connects the fragment, using his speed, got out of the way and got behind Sillid, stabbing him in the shoulder. Seeing this, Sillid thinks he's reading the trajectory of my spear and moving. Accordingly, as they were unable to land a single hit on the fragment, Rockin thinks he has the movement of a warrior who has experienced countless battles. He's barely avoiding the Frost Monarch's attacks and fending off all of my attacks at the same time. As he was distracted by Rockin, Sillid sneaks up behind him, preparing to freeze him in place. But the fragment is too fast, and he kicks him under his chin, launching him in the air and smashing into a building. As he is doing that, Rockin also closes in and opens up his mouth, about to bite into shreds, and gets pierced through his face instead and screams out in pain. And before he could recover, the fragment delivers an elbow to his ribs, and he gets thrown back a couple of feet. Furious, he rips out the dagger from his face, saying, I will tear you apart, but falls to the ground shaking. He turns back to look at Jinwoo and senses the overwhelming mana that is being emitted by him. Terrified, he jumps back, creating distance between himself and Jinwoo, and by that time, Sillid had also recovered, and as he tells the fragment that won't work on me again, He turns towards Rakan, instructing him to attack again, but Rakan tells him, "I will stop now." Scylla is shocked after hearing that, and asks if he was going to stop after coming this far, asking if he was out of his mind. Rakan tells him, "Can't you feel it? The mana surrounding us has started to cry." He says the Shadow Monarch is coming. He opens up a portal saying, "Count me out of this." Scylla asks him, "Didn't you promise to help me defeat the Shadow Monarch?" Rakan replies, "My promise was limited to only when the Shadow Monarch was in his human form. But since the real Monarch is coming, I no longer have a promise to keep." Scylla tries to stop him, saying, "You're running away with your tail between your legs. Even though you're the Beast Monarch," he replies, "you won't understand me because you have yet to experience the full power of the Shadow Monarch." And he teleports away, saying, "I shall pray for your fortune." After he leaves, Scylla decides to stay and fight, and tells the fragment, "Taste the terror of the frost. This is my true power." He buries his trident into the ground, and the area starts to get covered in an ice storm. Seeing this, Lim instructs his hunters, "We are retreating, leave this place at once." And the ice starts to convert into spears, and all of them rain down on the fragment. That gave Scylla enough time to prepare for a powerful attack, and he screams, "Mere humans dare challenge me," without knowing their place. As a gigantic piece of ice manifests in the sky, he tells the fragment, "Be trapped inside the eternal void with the Shadow Monarch." Seeing the size of the ice, he thinks, is he planning to destroy this entire area, and gets hit by one of the incoming projectiles as he was distracted, losing his arm. In the process, he looked in horror as the ice started to fall towards him, and before it could crash down on them, a shadow leaps towards it, crashing in the ice. And as the ice shatters, we see it's Baru and on the ground. The Shadow Monarch had appeared in his true form, shielding the fragment. He told Scylla, "Do not assume the position of the king with such measly power." While Scylla was standing there stunned, thinking, "He broke out of my spell," which means the commander-rank shadow soldiers have regained their powers. Seeing him like this, Jai was started to come out of the armor, revealing his true body, saying, "That's why I shouldn't trust prophecies." All of his soldiers were free, and they kneeled in front of him. And he asked, "Did the beast flee?" And Scylla's expression started to change, hearing him say, "Who dares to leave without my permission?" Horrified, he thinks it's a wall, which I couldn't even imagine. Overcoming the difference in power between me and him is just too significant. And as he was thinking, a dark bubble started to form around Jinwoo, which gradually covered most of the area in the city. It kept growing and was able to be seen from the space, and it covered half of the earth. And as the bubble disappears, Jinwoo says, "Found you." Thinking he was distracted, Scylla had a feeling he saw an opening that will never come again. He gathered all of his mana for one final attack, thinking, although there exists a power gap between us, for him to let his guard down with his enemy right in front of him. He thinks, "If I miss this opportunity, the only thing waiting for me is an inevitable death. So I must end everything with this single strike." And throws the trident towards Jinwoo, but Jinwoo effortlessly stopped it with his hand, and the weapon shattered into pieces. And seeing this, Scylla thought, how is this possible? So this is the power of the Shadow Monarch, the power of one of the strongest monarchs, and the fragment of brilliant light. But instead of striking back, Jinwoo tells him to wait, as he will save him for later, saying, "Wait patiently until I finish taking care of the beast." Somewhere in a forest, a portal appeared, and from it Rakan was emerging, thinking, "The aura of death is starting to close in on me. I regret needlessly arguing with the Frost Monarch, since it caused me to run away a bit too late. But now that things have come to this, I need to quickly hide here until the King of Dragons come back." As he was thinking, a shadow appeared behind him, and sensing it, he turned around. Thinking this aura, don't tell me he froze in fear as he sensed Jinwoo behind him, thinking the air is soaking with the smell of death. He gets to his knees, thinking the overwhelming power gap, where I can't win nor run away, the fear of strength I feel from my experiences. He tells himself to lower his head and obey him. He tells Jinwoo, "I, the King of Beasts, do not wish to fight against you. Please forgive me for my sinful acts and accept me as one of your allies, as in the near future the King of Dragons will set foot on this land with his soldiers, and I, along with my beast army, shall assist you." Hearing all that, Jinwoo agrees to spare his life, and Rakan, smirking, thinks he fell for it. How foolish. He isn't the real deal. If he was the real deal, there'd be no way he would forgive me, especially after I betrayed him once again and tried to get rid of his vessel. I bought time thanks to the humans' foolish forgiveness and affection. I just need to hold out until the King of Dragons gets here. And when that time comes, I will rip apart your corpse into pieces. But tells Jinwoo, I shall serve you with loyalty. Seeing him like this, Jinwoo tells him before that we need to take care of something. I have 5 scars from your claws that pierced my heart. If you can survive 5 attacks from me, I will forgive you. Hearing that, Rakin gets furious and fully transforming. Says, you dare mock me, the king of beasts, and tells Jinwoo, although my life will end here, you will not leave unscathed. And seeing his towering monstrous form, Jinwoo summons his dagger, preparing to fight, and with lightning fast speed he passes by Rakin as a streak of light. And as he reappears behind him, Rakin had still not noticed what had happened as blood started to fall from his body, and he was missing one limb, and as he noticed what had happened, Jinwoo tells him 4 more left back in Korea. Baru was healing all the injured hunters, and looking at him, Silid thinks, I don't know about that ant who is healing humans, but this one's certainly an issue. He sees Igris coming straight towards him, and he thinks I've seen it before, the Knight of Death, one of the 2 wings of T's shadow army. He is Igris, and while running, he thinks now that it's able to use its full power, it's quite bothersome. They can regenerate as long as the Shadow Monarch still has mana, but I can't recover the mana I used for transformation. As he lands, he tells Igris, don't even think about doing something so meaningless. You think you can hold out much longer against me. And Igris stops, burying his sword into the ground, and from his cloak Jinwoo started to appear. As he emerges, he throws 2 teeth on the ground, and he tells Silid the Beast Monarch is dead. Hearing that, Silid thinks he killed the Beast Monarch in the few minutes that he was gone. Jinwoo tells him the Plague Monarch, the Beast Monarch, and the Frost Monarch. The deaths of these 3 will serve as a warning to the other monarchs. Hearing that, Silid prepares to fight, summoning his ice projectiles, but before he could attack, a dagger stabs him in his heart, and another pierces his shoulder. Desperate, he tries to attack Jinwoo with what little mana he has left, but Jinwoo grabs him by his mouth and slashes him, saying the Beast Monarch died on the 4th strike. I wonder how much longer you can survive. And Silid lets out a loud scream and turns back to his human form and starts to break down into pieces and disappears in the air. After taking out all the monarchs, Jinwoo asks Baru, where is the person who was protecting me earlier? Baru tells him he disappeared all of a sudden, and we see the man sitting as he managed to drag himself away from the battle. He sees his hand breaking down into pieces and thinks, I guess this is the consequence of receiving this power with a mere human's body. And accepting his fate, says it's fine, this is how it should be. And a dagger falls near him, and the man asks, did you really think I wouldn't know if you left like that? It was Jinwoo who was asking, why did you leave without a word again? Calling him his father, the story shifts back to a dungeon where Jinwoo's father was trapped. He tells Jinwoo what happened on that day. After clearing the dungeon boss of the gate, you must escape the gate within an hour. However, I had no choice but to be trapped within the dimensional rift. And the rulers lent me their strength and requested for me to stop the monarchs, including the Shadow Monarch, who was soon to be born. And after losing all means of escape, I had no choice to accept their offer, and I returned back to Earth as the ruler's emissary with a heavy responsibility. However, I was not able to fulfill that responsibility, although I knew that the worst calamity of humanity resided inside that body. I couldn't do anything other than observe from a distance. Meanwhile, the rulers, whose sole focus was to stop the complete advent of the Shadow Monarch, started to change their stance, and finally, the brightest fragment of light issued me a new order to protect the Shadow Monarch, as they had realized that in order to stop the Monarch's plan, they needed the power of the Shadow Monarch, as only his army was able to stop the King of Dragons, who was going to arrive before the soldiers of brilliant light, along with his armies. It was a huge gamble, not knowing whether he would side with the humans or the monsters, but now we know the results, and that is why I helped you. I didn't want to show you this side of me. Tears started to fall from Jinwoo's eyes after hearing that, and his father asks, did you hate me? Jinwoo tells him sometimes, and he apologized. Jinwoo explains, when I first started out as a hunter, when I was at death's door and barely survived to see Mom and Jaina again, you appeared in my mind, and I always hated you whenever it happened, but I also missed you. And asked, did you miss my? He pauses and asks, did you miss us? His father wasn't able to control his emotions, And he tells him, I missed you all the time. Even though you could not see me, I was happy about the fact that I was able to see you from afar. He gets up hugging Jinwoo, saying, you've grown well. Jinwoo asks Hymus if the rulers are the ones who controlled you and are now throwing you away. His father tells him, they simply gave me an opportunity to make a choice. I chose to protect you, and I don't regret a single thing about it. But now I want to talk to you more. I want to stay with you longer. I'm sorry that I couldn't be a great father to you. And after saying that, he disappeared in air, and Jinwoo was left standing there alone, and he lets out a scream.
And the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.
Welcome back to another episode of Solo Leveling. Please like the video and subscribe. The story shifts to his mother and sister. His mother was looking out the window, and she calls Jaina, telling her, let's move now. With tears in her eyes, she says, we can move now. Meanwhile, Jinwoo, in his frustration, shouts out to the remaining monarchs, saying, you will definitely pay the price for what happened today. So, the day that the Shadow Monarch's outcries shook the world was the day when the prelude of war was raised, that we see a drone flying over the city as someone reports that Hunter Thomas is not in a life-threatening condition. And we can see that ambulances on the scene are transporting the injured to local hospitals. Things were starting to settle down for the time being. We see Chairman Wu looking at the destruction caused by the battle between the monarchs, thinking about the beast-type demon, the woman who attacked the city, and the White Walker. They were not normal monsters. He remembers what Jinwoo told him at Chairman Go Gunhee's funeral, that he was going to kill the one responsible himself. Remembering that, tears started to fall from his eyes, thinking this was the White Walker, and he thanks Jinwoo for avenging the death of their chairman. After a few days, all the hunters from around the world gathered under the gigantic gate that was still looming in the sky. China's 7-star hunter was also present in the crowd. He comments, the gate is massive like I've heard. Even if all the hunters in the world gathered, they could just be sucked up into that gate and vanish. Thomas had also recovered and was telling the hunters, it will start soon. Wu was thinking, this is the first time so many hunters from all around the world have gathered in one place. I wonder how many of them will survive. Meanwhile, Jinwoo was looking at the gate, waiting for it to break. Chao approaches him, telling him, I've never seen you this nervous before. And as they all were thinking, the gate started to break, and the hunters prepared to battle against the monsters that were about to emerge from it. As the armies started to appear from the gate, Jinwoo was shocked as he saw shadow soldiers coming out of the gate. Slowly, the armies began to enter into this world. Seeing the soldiers getting close, the hunters prepared to fight, but a voice was heard telling them all not to move. They all started to wonder why they were stopping. Wu asks Jinwoo, what is he doing? And Jinwoo tells him, it's all right, Chairman. The hunters stood there, looking at the soldiers that were descending to the earth, and all of them stopped in front of Jinwoo. The sky was filled with shadow soldiers as far as the eye could see. The commander of the army stood in front of Jinwoo, and all of a sudden, a loud thud was heard on the battlefield as all the hunters saw the massive shadow soldier kneeling in front of Jinwoo, introducing himself as the Grand Marshal Bellion. Gradually, all of the soldiers, along with the dragons, started to kneel in front of Jinwoo. Bellion tells Jinwoo, we respectfully greet our liege. While all the hunters in the back were surprised to see what was going on in front of their eyes, Thomas asks Leonard if he can see those creatures. Looking at the dragons, he thinks even just one of them could threaten humanity. Yet, there are 3 of them gathered in one place. While Jinwoo thinks, this is the real Shadow Army. This must be what the previous Shadow Monarch, Ashbourne, left behind for me. And seeing all this, he thinks, now's the start of the real war. A few days later, at the Korean Hunter Association, Wu, along with some other officials, were sitting in a conference room discussing their next move as the foreign press was requesting them to release an official explanation of what happened. The American Hunter Bureau was also asking them to reveal Hunter Jinwoo's location. Hearing all the reports, Wu thinks hundreds of thousands of demonic beasts came out of the colossal gate, and they have been absorbed into Hunter Jinwoo's army. Who would have ever thought things would turn out this way? He tells the men, I am well aware of how confused everyone is due to Jinwoo's disappearance, but this isn't the first time he had disappeared like this, and instructs them, we need to start getting used to this. If we, as the Hunters Association, can't understand the agonies of Hunter Jinwoo, then who could? The scene shifts to another place where the signs of battle were visible, and we see Jinwoo standing on Tusk's hand as he looks down at his armies that were about to collide. As he was doing that, the Grand Marshal Bellion says, holding a practice battle by dividing the forces into two? I've never ever thought about this kind of military training. Jinwoo tells him, they can't die after all. As they were talking, Baru approaches them. He kneels before Jinwoo, asking for him to test his qualifications for the Grand Marshal position. He stands face to face with Bellion, saying, as a commander, I challenge Grand Marshal Bellion to a battle. Seeing them, Jinwoo was excited and gave his permission. As they both were about to face off, the army gathered around them to watch them fight. As the battle started, Baru lets out a loud scream, and Bellion also prepares by bringing out his weapon. Seeing this, Jinwoo thinks, he also uses a great sword like Igris, but he's much bigger in size compared to Igris. Same with his sword. I assume he leans more towards power than speed. And thinks, in that case, Baru might have a chance. But as Baru got closer, his sword broke into a whip, and as it landed, it dealt damage to multiple places. But Baru somehow managed to dodge it and leap towards Bellion from an opening in the weapon. But before he could close the distance, Bellion trapped him inside the whip. Seeing this, Jinwoo thought, is it already over? To think that he neutralized Baru's attack in an instant. His reflexes are beyond what I had expected. Every single strike from him is powerful enough to destroy the earth below him. No wonder he holds the title of Grand Marshal. But he still shouldn't let his guard down. The greatest strength of an insect is its tenacity, Jinwoo thinks. The story shifts to China, Beijing International Airport, where Liu Jigang, along with some other hunters who went to assist Korea with the gigantic gate, had landed and were entering the country, surrounded by the media, hailed as the proud hunters of China who left to support South Korea in their battle. As Liu was walking away, a man approached him, saying, although many are sending their applause towards Hunter Liu for his courageous choice to support South Korea, there are many who think there is no reason for us to aid South Korea. What is your opinion on the matter? Hearing that, Liu gets annoyed and asks, who is spouting such nonsense? Do those guys have a brain as an accessory? Aren't they able to read maps? Do they not realize what country is just above South Korea? If there's anyone stupid enough to say such a thing, please tell them this. I, Liu Jigang, was not confident enough in being able to stop something if Hunter Jinwoo failed to stop it, so I went to assist him. If anyone has a problem with that, they can go face the demonic beast themselves. But as they entered the city, a horrifying scene awaited them. Liu, looking at it in disbelief, said, there was no way, as a gigantic gate was looming in the sky of China. The story shifts to the monarch of Transfiguration, Yogimut, who was reporting to someone about the recent incidents that took place on Earth, how 3 of the monarchs were eliminated by the Shadow Monarch. Hearing that the Shadow Monarch had turned against them, the entity tells Yogimut, I will take care of him myself, and instructs the other monarchs not to interfere in this matter anymore. From the side, a gigantic claw of a dragon appears, and the entity says, we must prevent further losses in our forces. And the screen fills with dragons as the entity tells them, my soldiers, prepare for battle. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the fight between Baru and Bellion was coming to an end. Baru was smashed to the ground, and a sword landed next to his face. We see Bellion standing victorious over Baru. The battlefield fell silent after the fight was over, but Baru, struggling to get back to his feet, tells Jinwoo, I can still go on. Seeing him like this, Jinwoo asks, why are you so obsessed with becoming the Grand Marshal? Baru tells him, I shall become the Grand Marshal and always be by your side. Hearing that, Jinwoo tells him, then the Grand Marshal can stand on my right and you can be on my left. Hearing that, Baru got emotional and was about to say something cheesy like from a drama that he had watched, but Jinwoo tells him not to do that. Seeing all this, Igris also comes to ask permission to challenge Bellion, but Baru stops him, saying, "You can be behind me." All of their attention turns toward the side, and they saw a crowd of shadows cheering as the dragons and Tusk prepare for something. All of a sudden, the dragons let out a powerful fire attack toward the sky, showing off their power. But seeing this, Tusk smirked, looking at them, and using the power of the Orb of Avarice, he launched a massive fire wave towards the sky that was even more powerful than all of the dragon's attacks combined. It was visible from far away from the island, and the whole area lit up. Seeing this, the dragons felt annoyed, as Tusk was flexing his strength in front of them while being cheered on by the army below. Seeing all of this, Jinwoo thought, "Isn't it cheating to be holding the Orb of Avarice during the competition?" He saw some soldiers carrying materials and asked Bellion what they were doing. Bellion told Jinwoo, "They're planning on making a small place to stay, so you can rest comfortably for the time they are here." He asked Jinwoo why he wasn't calling back his soldiers into his shadow. Jinwoo told him, "I just wanted to let them take a breather, as they were stuck in the dimensional rift until we came here." That he asked Bellion if he wasn't sad about the fact that he is no longer able to meet Ashbourne, the previous Shadow Monarch. Bellion told him, "I was by his side when he was facing the rulers that opposed the Absolute Being, and I self-proclaimed myself to be his first soldier when he obtained the power of the Shadow. I have been by his side for almost an eternity and never once doubted his decisions." Jinwoo told him, "I want to hear the story of you and Ashbourne." Bellion told him, "It may turn into a very long story." He told Jinwoo, "It was when I was still a fruit of the World Tree." He explained that all of the soldiers of the heavens are born on the branches of the World Tree in the form of a fruit, and it's a tree large enough to cover the entire sky with its branches. Fast forward, we see Jinwoo cooking for his family, thinking, "I must let people know about the existence of the 8 armies, who may arrive at any moment, and let them know that a war is nearing. I cannot promise the safety of everyone, nor can I promise that the world will stay the same as it has been." That's how great the power of the King of Dragons was when I witnessed it through Ashbourne's memories. Meanwhile, Jaya was praising Jinwoo's cooking, telling her mother, "I never knew my brother could cook this well." Looking at them enjoying the meal, Jinwoo was thinking the King of Dragons, along with his armies, brought everything in front of them down to ruins and ashes. And such enemies are now targeting the earth. That's why everyone needs to prepare themselves for what's to come. Seeing him like this, his mother asked, "Is something going on?" As when his father was about to do something dangerous, he often cooked me a meal like this, saying, "You really take after your father." Jinwoo assured her, "It's nothing like that," and started to go to the door, saying, "I think we have a visitor. I'll answer the door." Jaina told him there wasn't any doorbell ring. As he opened the door, he asked the person the reason for his visit. It was Jinho's father, Yumi Younghan. He apologized for visiting like this without notice and asked if Jinwoo could give him a moment of his time. That yes, they were walking. Yumi Younghan told him, "I woke up from eternal slumber because I thought I was special, but then I realized that such miracles wouldn't happen so easily. And since the only people who have ever woken up from an eternal slumber were me and your mother, I couldn't help but suspect it was you." Turning towards Jinwoo, he asked, "Why did you help me?" Jinwoo told him, "Because I decided that you are a trustworthy person. If you were a person who would do anything to get what you want, I wouldn't have risked danger to save you." Hearing that, Yumi Younghan told him, "I don't know how to show my gratitude," and asked Jinwoo to let him return at least half of his favor. He asked if there was anything he wanted. Hearing that, Jinwoo told him, "There isn't anything I want. However, if something happens to me, could you take care of my mother and sister?" Fast forward, we see Wu showing Jinwoo the footage of the colossal gate that appeared in Shanghai, China. He tells Jinwoo, it's not just in China. 8 more colossal gates appeared all around the world. He asked if these were also Jinwoo's soldiers, but Jinwoo told him, "No, they're our enemies," and asked Wu if he trusted him. Seeing him like this, Wu told him, "Yes, I do." Jinwoo got up from his seat, saying, "Please trust what I am about to show you." He placed his finger on the chairman's forehead and transferred all the memories related to the king of the mad dragons and the soldiers of brilliant light into his head. He saw all of his past experiences from the dungeons and got overwhelmed. Jinwoo removed his finger from his head, and he started to panic, saying, "Impossible! How could such things exist?" He told Jinwoo, "I had always thought that the power of hunters was a blessing for humanity. So I thought we needed to protect humanity by fighting against the demonic beasts. But if what you just showed me is really true, then my thoughts would have been nothing more than haughtiness." Panicking, he thought I was misunderstanding everything. To think that the awakened are the only people who are able to survive after the true war, as if they are filtering out so that only certain humans live. This is not the war between humans and the monarchs, but the war between the monarchs and the rulers, between two groups who possess enormous power. And he turned towards Jinwoo, asking, "Are you planning on fighting against such enemies all by yourself?" Jinwoo told him, "Yes, I am." Sweating, he asked, "How could we be of assistance to you?" Fast forward, we see a hall filled with hunters from around the world. Wu asked the man if any more of the hunters were coming. He told Jinwoo, "No, sir. Only the 152 countries I've reported to you this morning." The man asked him, "Just what did Hunter Jinwoo tell you yesterday in the office? You never saw your face becoming that pale." And Wu thinks the army of dragons appearing from within darkness, and the single dragon who was flying behind the army of dragons. The majesty such that even when every single hunter in the world gathered up against it, they wouldn't be able to even leave a scratch. The pressure from the power, that's enough to burn down all the lands in the world with a single breath. I felt it and wonders just how is Hunter Jinwoo planning on fighting against them. He calls Jinwoo, telling him, "I had gathered the representatives from every country as you asked. Where are you right now?" And as he was still on the call, Jinwoo appeared behind him, saying, "I've just arrived." That he puts away his phone, saying, "I guess asking for your location is meaningless now." That he tells Jinwoo that there will be chaos when people find out about it, and some countries won't be able to handle the chaos. Jinwoo tells him, "I'm aware of that." Wu is concerned about the consequences and says, "If that's really what you think, the truth will be uncovered to the world." Director David Brennan, sitting in a conference room, thinking there are quite a lot of people gathered here. Presidents, prime ministers, guild masters, and even the chairman of the hunter associations. Everyone must be feeling nervous about what Hunter Jinwoo wants to tell them. It would be great if Hunter Jinwoo would say the gates won't cause much harm, like last time, but if he were to say something completely opposite, everyone will have to go through a rough time. After some time, Jinwoo started to speak. He told the people present in the room that no one would be able to avoid the fight. They would appear before their eyes and bring destruction upon everyone. After hearing that, some people did not believe what Jinwoo had said, and they asked if he was saying that even national-level hunters wouldn't be enough to stop them. Jinwoo told them at least a couple of hundred demonic beasts on par with Kamish, which is considered to be the world's worst disaster, would appear. So not even national-level hunters would be able to stop them. The crowd started to demand proof, saying otherwise they wouldn't be able to believe what you're saying. Hearing them, Jinwoo started to raise his hand, and everyone was horrified to see what was in front of them. They saw multiple gates appearing behind Jinwoo. The official started panicking after seeing this, thinking he had the ability to create gates, multiple ones at once. Jinwoo told them, "Our enemy can create gates whenever and wherever they wish, just like how I did. They're only taking their time due to the massive size of their army." A man sitting next to the director started shouting, asking, "Could it be that you're one of them? And the soldiers you brought from the previous gate, did you bring them to kill us?" But in the next second, shivering, he tells Jinwoo, "Of course, I trust you, Hunter Jinwoo." The director asks Jinwoo, "Now that we know what will come from the gate, what do we need to do?" Jinwoo replies by saying, "Please stay away from the gates. Get as far away as you can from the gates." Fast forward, we see the empty cities after the warning that Jinwoo gave in the conference, as his speech created a massive ripple effect, with the warning that humanity will not be able to handle the number of demonic beasts that will come from the gates. Everyone tried their best to get as far away from the gates as possible. We see Jinwoo discussing with Igris about the war that is about to come. Igris tells Jinwoo, "We don't stand a chance in an all-out war." We see Baru and Bellion on the ground, as Jinwoo asks Bellion, "How much bigger do you think their army will be compared to ours?" Bellion tells Jinwoo, "I'd expect their numbers to be at least 100 times larger." Hearing that, Jinwoo thinks that means they'd have at least 10 million soldiers. The story shifts to Canada, where their S-rank hunter J. Mills is being interviewed. He tells the people that he does not believe a single word that Hunter Jinwoo told in the gathering of the world leaders. The interviewer tells him, Hunter Jinwoo is one of the greatest hunters in the world, so wouldn't it be wise to heed his warning? Jay replies by saying, "No matter how great of a hunter he is, not everything he says is the truth." The story shifts back to Jinwoo, where he calls Baru and asks him to drop on the ground. Baru does as instructed, and Jinwoo asks, "You call this a nice place I can stay in? Aside from its size, is it even meant for me to live in?" Baru replies, "I thought anything less wouldn't suffice for you, my liege." Looking at the huge castle, Jinwoo asks, "Why did you put up that flag?" Bellion falls to the ground, and Jinwoo asks, "Was that your idea?" Jinwoo asks him, "What will happen to the Shadow Army after their monarch dies? Would you be in charge of the Shadow Army if I were to die?" Bellion explains, "Their lives are one with the Shadow Monarch, and so the moment you pass away will also be the moment we perish." Fast forward, we see Woo showing Jinwoo the interview of Hunter J, in which he was calling Jinwoo's warning a bluff, saying they will fight against the monsters coming from the gates. Woo explains that hunters have been gathering in Canada, with J. Mills as their leader. Additionally, it seems that other strong hunters from other countries have also been preparing for a raid. He asks Jinwoo what he was planning on doing. Jinwoo tells him he will head to China to assist them with a dungeon break while thinking, "It's impossible for me to face all 8 armies at once, so I need to get rid of the threat that's closest to Korea first since they will be the biggest threat to my family. I will take care of the other monarchs after I'm done clearing the gate in China." The longer the battle goes on, the higher the chances of us winning the war. Fast forward, we see Jinwoo landing in China, where he is greeted by Hunter Liu Jigang. Jinwoo asks why he was there instead of government officials. Liu tells him, "They were making some stupid placards, so I decided to greet you myself." As they started to walk, Jinwoo noticed that the gate was so large that it was even visible from the airport. As they arrive at the location, Liu shows Jinwoo the hunter team that was gathered under the gate to assist them in the raid. He tells Jinwoo that this is the 100,000 hunter army of China. Seeing all of them, Jinwoo thought, if there are 100,000, they might stand a chance in this war. Liu explains, "This is our elite army, where we have not only numbers but also skilled individuals." After all the preparations were complete, Liu told Jinwoo it would start soon, and Jinwoo started to summon his soldiers. Seeing them, Liu was amazed, thinking he was on another level. He asked Jinwoo if all of these were his summons, while Baru told Liu, "The left side of the king is my place. Who dares to take my place beside the king?" Jinwoo tells him, "He's on our side." As they were talking, the gate started to break. Jinwoo was waiting for the monsters to start falling from the skies, but nothing happened. Bellion approached Jinwoo saying, "It's strange. I don't feel any presence from the gate." Hearing that, Jinwoo realized something and asked Bellion, "What about all the other locations?" Bellion reported that according to the other shadow soldiers, they all seemed to be the same. Jinwoo realized that all the gates were empty. He thought they created different gates across different parts of the world to divide up their army, but they probably put all their forces in the gate furthest away from me. The story shifts to Canada, where many hunters had gathered to fend off the monsters that were about to appear from the gate. J. Mills was at the front saying, "To think that everyone is mindlessly relying on Hunter Jinwoo, and we see a crowd of protesters shouting, 'We will not give up Canada. Our hunters will protect us and the land.'" All of a sudden, the gate started to break, but nothing happened. All of them were standing there, wondering what was going on, as demonic beasts were supposed to be pouring out of the gate. Some said maybe Jinwoo was bluffing. But as they were discussing, a humanoid entity started to appear from the gate and stopped, hovering over them. Seeing the entity, they thought it was just a human. After some time, The entity landed in front of Jay Mills, asking if he was their king. While Jay was looking at it, thinking that's not a demonic beast, one of the hunters from the back tells Mills, "There is nothing to be surprised about. Demonic beasts are capable of making their own gear, and they use the runic alphabet and live in a strictly hierarchical society. In other words, they have a level of intelligence similar to that of humans. They simply did not wish to communicate with us until now." Hearing that, Jay was smirking, thinking, "I knew it. This was how Hunter Jinwoo was able to make the soldiers from the first gate his own. He was able to communicate with them like this. I guess they ask who their king is and obey that king. So he foolishly asks the entity, 'What if I am the king?' But the entity, ignoring him, says, 'Looks like he's not here.' 10 minutes earlier, back in China, we see Jinwoo asking the officials, 'Is there no way to confirm what's going on in Canada?' The person tells him he will try something. Jinwoo calls Adam White of the Hunters Bureau and asks him what is going on with Canada's colossal gate. But as he hears the crowd from the back, Jinwoo realizes that White is also in Canada. He asks White what he was doing there, and White explains, "We are out on the site of Canada's colossal gate together with other agents." Jinwoo asks the reason for them being there. White tells him, "We couldn't just sit and watch the situation in Canada. So many of us agents, including me, have been dispatched here." Hearing that, Jinwoo thinks they still don't realize the scale of the enemy's army and asks what the condition of the gate. White tells him the gate is empty, just like the other gates. It was very quiet on site, and Jinwoo let out a sigh of relief. But White suddenly told him something was coming out of the gate. It was a person. Hearing that, Jinwoo's eyes widened. He shouted, telling White to run away from there as far as possible. But with a flash of light, all the hunters in the front were turned to ash. Jinwoo told Adam, "You still have time to run away while you still can." But White was stunned to see the army that was coming out of the gate. He told Jinwoo, "Dragons are coming from the sky. There are an endless number of dragons and beasts coming out of the gate." He said, "How could this be? All kinds of demonic beasts have gathered in one place." Jinwoo thought, "Now that it has come to this, I need to save White. If I just control the shadow I put on him." All of a sudden, a high orc appeared in front of White. Jinwoo told him he was going to teleport him away from that place. But before they could teleport, the entity approached White, saying, "Where do you think you're going?" Seeing the entity, White was terrified, and with a shaky voice, he called Jinwoo's name. In his final moments, he saw a fireball coming straight towards him. We see Jinwoo, who, after hearing a loud blast, knew he was too late. He thought, "I should have expected this. They know they're up against my shadow army, which becomes stronger the longer the fight lasts. My opponent would minimize the number of battles by gathering all their forces at a single location." They opened 8 gates, as if they were following their original plan. By then, they sent their entire army to the gate furthest away from me. Even if I were to move over there immediately, I would end up in an all-out war. My plan to buy time went down the drain. Back in Canada, Antares, the king of dragons and the monarch of destruction, was smirking, saying, "The sound of living persons' heartbeats, the sound of their screams, and the sound of the destruction of creatures resonated like music in my ears." He told the other monarchs that they were done with the preparations and ordered the army to destroy everything, saying, "That is the sole mission of our existence." Fast forward, we see a man in his office looking at the footage of the destruction caused by the army of the monarchs. The person said, "They must have all died, the hunters, agents, and the reporters on the scene." It was director David Brennan, who was thinking hundreds of dragons, along with oceans of giants, beasts, and insects behind them. This disaster cannot be contained by humans. It's all over. There is no way to stop such an army. It's only a matter of time before they arrive in the US. Now I understand why Hunter Jinwoo advised everyone to stay as far away from the gates as possible. As he was thinking about everything, a shadow started to appear in front of him. It was Jinwoo. He seemed in a hurry and told the director, "I'm paying you a sudden visit because I'm looking for something." He asked for the runestone that was extracted from the corpse of Kamish. The director was surprised and told Jinwoo that the runestone was managed by the Hunters Bureau, but he remembered the situation they were in and apologized to Jinwoo, saying, "I'm still a little drunk right now," while thinking, "What am I even saying? Why does the Hunters Bureau even matter anymore? Those runestones mean nothing if the entire US is about to be destroyed, let alone the Hunters Bureau." He told Jinwoo, "I can hand over the runestones, but why do you need them?" Jinwoo told him he was planning on launching a counterattack using the power of those runestones. As they were making their way to the room containing the stone, the director asked Jinwoo, "If beings called rulers sent those demonic beasts here, then what are these runestones that are inside the demonic beast bodies?" Jinwoo explained that these were just gifts from the rulers to help humans hunt down demonic beasts more efficiently. He explained that when a demonic beast dies, their abilities are sealed in these runestones. Rulers created runestones to help humans get strong, so they might have a chance of survival in the final battle against the armies of the Monarchs. Hearing that, David asked Jinwoo if he was really going to be able to stop the monsters with these, and Jinwoo told him, "I'll have to try." After he had acquired the runestone, he asked the director for another favor. The story shifts to Lady Selner, who says, "I never thought someone would come looking for me at a time like this." She asks Jinwoo for his identity, saying, "You are not the person I know. In the past, the darkness existed deep inside you, but now you are darkness itself." Jinwoo tells her, "I'm the same person you know, but I simply became one with the darkness you saw back then." He asks her if she is really able to see the future and requests her to look into his future. She tells him, "I understand," and takes his hand. After a bit, tears start to come down from her eyes, and she asks, "You really plan to take everything on by yourself? How could a single human carry this much by themselves? Are you planning on protecting everything by sacrificing yourself?" Hearing that, Jinwoo starts to get up, saying, "Thankfully, that means I can get there at least." She tells him, "No one will be able to remember. It'll be a lonely fight by yourself." But Jinwoo starts to teleport away. We see Jinwoo standing on top of a tower. He takes out his phone and calls someone. The person asks if it is really him. Jinwoo apologizes to the person, saying, "I've been busy lately." It was Hunter Cha who was telling him, "It's okay, I've been busy as well." Jinwoo tells her they haven't seen each other for so long and that they will meet soon. Cha asks Jinwoo if he can promise her something, asking him that he will come and see her. Jinwoo tells her, "I promise I will do that." She gets happy after hearing that, and as she is thinking, Hunter Choi startles her by saying, "We should get going now." We see all the hunters from around the world gathered there. The Asian Hunter Alliance, the European Hunter Alliance, the African Temporary Guild Union, and the Chinese Emergency Response Alliance. Hundreds of thousands of hunters are on their way to the battlefield. The story shifts back to Canada, where Antares was standing on top of countless bodies of hunters that were defeated in the war. He lets out a massive mana wave for Jinwoo to know his location, saying, "I'm right here." The wave was so powerful that it was felt all around the world and reached Jinwoo. Antares says, "I've already taken the lives of tens of millions of your kind. How much longer are you planning on hiding for?" Jinwoo says, "I will come and meet you soon." Hello guys, welcome back to another episode of Solo Leveling. We see Antares standing on top of a building, thinking he has been silent. What is he trying to do? He wonders, since he's up against an army of 10 million. Going into battle head-on would be nothing more than suicide. He might have run away to the bottom of the abyss. As he was thinking, a rocket crashed straight into his face, followed by many more that were coming straight toward him. The area was covered in a huge explosion, and we see military planes flying in the sky. They reported that they managed to hit the target, but could not confirm if the attack was effective with the naked eye. As they were trying to confirm if they managed to take out the creature, the place started to light up, and a gigantic eye appeared in front of them. They saw a humongous dark entity standing in front of them. The creature said, "How boring," before taking out all the soldiers present in the area. The story shifts back to the castle that the shadow soldiers built for Jinwoo. Inside, Jinwoo is sitting, planning his next move. He looks up behind him and sees writing on the wall. He gets happy, thinking about Baru and thanking him. Baru appears from the shadow with tears in his eyes, knowing that Jinwoo was planning on facing the monarch of destruction. Bellion also appears, telling Jinwoo it's far too dangerous. Igris says, I share his thoughts. Jinwoo tells them, I know that you're worried about my safety, but there are times when I can't let danger prevent me from doing what needs to be done. Jinwoo asks Bellion, if Ashbourne were put in the same situation as me, what would he have done? Bellion tells Jinwoo, if it was him, he wouldn't have let anything stop him from doing what needs to be done. Hearing that, Jinwoo starts to smile, and as Bellion looks at him, he sees Ashbourne in Jinwoo and thinks he resembles him. Knowing that they can't stop Jinwoo from doing this, all three of them kneel in front of him, and Bellion tells Jinwoo, I will stand beside you until the end, my liege. Hearing that, Jinwoo starts to get up, and they begin to head towards the battlefield. As they are going, Bellion asks Jinwoo, shouldn't you contact your family? Jinwoo tells him, no. If I were to hear my family's voice right now, I don't think I would be able to proceed. The story shifts to the battlefield, where a plane was being chased by a dragon, and in the next second, it was destroyed by the creature. But the pilot managed to eject just in time and landed on the ground. As he was making his way towards safety, a horrific scene was waiting for him. He saw a bunch of demons blocking the path and killing everything that moves. The man, sweating, was thinking about how he was going to survive in this situation and felt a liquid fall on his shoulder. As he looked behind him, he saw a monster coming toward him. As the creature was about to end him, the man managed to jump out of the way. He picked up his weapon and started to shoot at the creature. He unloaded the whole clip on the creature's face, but it was no use. He stopped, accepting his fate, and saw the monster coming straight towards him. He closed his eyes, but as he opened them again, he saw the corpse of the monster in front of him. The man was trying to figure out what just happened, and as he looked in front of him, he saw Jinwoo, who had saved the man. He turned towards the man, instructing him to run as a bunch of monsters were charging right towards Jinwoo. The man screamed, trying to warn Jinwoo of the incoming threat. Jinwoo raised his weapon and, with one swing of his daggers, slashed through all of the monsters without moving an inch, saying, this is the first step of the war. I will start with these guys, and use shadow extraction on the dead monsters, turning them all into his soldiers. The story shifts to Antares, who had sensed the presence of the shadow monarch. He told the other monarchs about his arrival. Yogyamunt suggested that they should bring all of their forces and launch an attack on him right away. Tarnak told them he couldn't sense the army of the dead among his soldiers. He must be spreading his forces out to cover a wider area. Hearing that, Antares thought he must be trying to absorb their forces by going alone into the battlefield. He's trying to buy some time by avoiding a direct battle and wonders what the Shadow Monarch is aiming for. Back in Korea, we see Woo looking at the news, where they were talking about how the hunters who went to subjugate the demons were wiped out, along with the military dispatched by the US government to buy time for the civilians to evacuate. Seeing everything, Woo thinks about the disaster happening on the other side of the earth. After Canada, even the US, with the most powerful military in the world, is being helplessly destroyed by the monsters. So now, the only thing humanity can do is pray for a miracle and wonder just what kind of a miracle can stop them. That we see the situation on the battlefield, where hundreds of new shadow soldiers have joined the army, just like a huge tsunami engulfing everything. The darkness of the shadows slowly started staining the battlefield. We see a flash of purple light cutting through everything in its path. It was Jinwoo, who was taking out the creatures present in the area, increasing his army in the process. As he was doing that, he was spotted by a giant-type monster that attacked Jinwoo using his weapon with such force that the impact was visible from a distance. But from the dust, Jinwoo appeared, having managed to evade the attack. He charged towards the creature, targeting its leg, and chopped it off with one swing of his dagger. Not giving the creature any time to react, The shadow army charged towards it, overwhelming the creature and taking it out of the fight. As Jinwoo was standing in front of the creature, he noticed something. He looked up, and above him were dragons covering the sky and coming straight towards him. Seeing the flying lizards, Jinwoo thought, did the army of doom start moving? Since I can't sense the Dragon King, I don't think they're planning on making a move just yet. But there's nothing to be disappointed about, since there's a lot of time left. If he's hesitating to make a move, I just need to provide a reason for him to do so and use shadow extraction on the defeated giant. As the lizards get close, a shadow reaches out and starts to attack them. It was the same giant monster that Jinwoo had just defeated, and as the creature was taking out the dragons, a massive fireball was seen in the sky. In an instant, the giant was torn to shreds by a powerful fire attack. We see a gigantic dragon in the air. The creature says, "Who dares try to oppose the great Dragon King with mere puppets made of mana? As someone who serves the Dragon King, I will destroy you." As the creature is talking, it fails to notice Jinwoo, who is already standing behind him. As the creature looks behind him, he sees Jinwoo coming straight towards him. Using Kamish's blade, Jinwoo slices the creature's neck like butter. As the creature dies, and Terry senses that Jinwoo managed to defeat the army of dragons that was sent to take him out, and he comments, "The Shadow Monarch is becoming stronger." He decides to attack Jinwoo at once and instructs Yogimon to stay behind and wait for the Shadow Army's ambush. We see the sky filled with many gates, and the Monarch of Destruction says, "I won't let him go." The story shifts to another place where the army is trying to contain the situation on the streets, but their weapons have no effect on the creatures. Seeing the situation, their commanding officer orders the soldiers to keep firing without worrying about saving ammo, as this way they can at least stop them from moving by shooting them in the legs or arms, making time for the backup of the hunters to arrive. But it was no use, as the creatures managed to close in the distance and started to take out the soldiers. An ogre charged towards the soldiers, and as the creature got close, it was punched in the face by someone and went flying back. It was Thomas, who had arrived on the battlefield. Smirking, he told the soldiers, "I have seen all of them in dungeons before. There were a lot of them, but they weren't all that tough." Seeing him, the soldiers got happy. Thinking now that Thomas was here, they were saved. Thomas sensed a strong presence in the area and turned toward the location, saying, "You are the human from last time." We see Tarnak among the creatures, looking at Thomas. Tarnak comments, "A weak vessel who nearly died at the hands of the beast monarch." He tells Thomas, "I am the king of the monstrous humanoids, the monarch of steel body. Surely you realize that I could take your life in the blink of an eye." But Thomas wasn't intimidated and told him, "Is that really what you think?" We see shadows emerging behind Thomas, who was telling him, "I'm not very fond of confusing things." In the next second, Bellion appeared at Thomas's side, saying, "It's been a while, monarch of steel body." Seeing all the shadows with Thomas, Tarnak was confused and asked, "Why is the Shadow Army here?" They must have been hiding within the human shadow while concealing their presence. He thought, "I must notify the Dragon King," but for some reason, he was unable to do so. As he turned around, he saw Tusk, who was preventing him from contacting the other monarchs. Looking at the situation, he thought this strategy couldn't have been conceived by the Shadow Monarch or his soldiers. It doesn't correspond to the way the Shadow Army does things, which is to sentence the enemies in front of them to death. Furious, he started to transform, thinking this is the way of the humans, and shouted, "He does not qualify to be a monarch." Hearing that, Baru, all charged up with mana, started to approach him, saying, "Take back what you just said. It's a heavy sin to insult my king." Hearing that, the monarch snapped, saying, "A mere soldier dares to stand in the way of monarchs," and fully transformed, towering over Baru as they prepared to fight. The scene shifts, and we see the Shadow Monarch and the Monarch of Destruction face to face as they both face off. And Terry's thinks, "I can't get in contact with the Monarch of Iron Body," and wonders if he betrayed him, or could it be the doing of the Shadow Monarch? All of a sudden, He launches an attack towards Jinwoo, thinking, I must kill you for sure. Jinwoo, who wasn't expecting him to attack so suddenly, was standing there stunned. As Antares stopped, the area where Jinwoo was standing was completely destroyed. As Antares looked up, he saw Jinwoo in the air, who managed to dodge the attack at the last second. He summoned his army, and all of a sudden, an army of dragons appeared from his shadow and started to rain down towards Antares from the sky. Meanwhile, China's 7-star hunter was taking out the giants that were roaming the streets. After defeating the creature, he said, things like giants aren't much of a problem as long as we're not fighting at sea. He thought, all the magic power over land is trembling. There are probably tens of thousands of hunters confronting endless numbers of magic beasts everywhere, especially since I can feel my whole body getting pricked by that magic power at this distance. Back in the fight, we see a huge explosion as chunks of shadows get scattered in the air. Antares asks Jinwoo, are those good-for-nothing soldiers all you have? You sent your main forces to the monarch of Iron Body and tried to fight me with these mere troops. But as he looks towards Jinwoo, he sees him fleeing through a portal. Antares chases after him, thinking, I won't let him escape so easily, no matter what. And as he appears on the other side of the portal, he is surprised to see the Shadow Army in front of him. Seeing this, he thinks, has he already absorbed the troops of the monarch of Iron Body? As he looks to the side, he sees the king of monstrous humanoids in a pathetic situation, where he was missing 3 of his 4 limbs, and Baru was sitting on top of him, looking at him. Antares says, he defeated the monarch of Iron Body's troops first and then came after me. Not a bad strategy. He tells Jinwoo that this all was of no use, and we see Yogimont standing on top of a building with the sky filled with many gates. Antares tells Jinwoo, these are the gates that the monarch of Transfiguration, Yogimont, has prepared. By using these, I can summon as many of my troops as possible. As the sky starts to fill up with the dragons, Antares tells Jinwoo, looks like I've completely crushed your plans. This misjudgment of yours will be the cause of your death. But instead of being concerned, Jinwoo starts to smirk. He cancels his summons and calls back all his soldiers. Seeing this, Antares asks for the reason for him doing that and asks if Jinwoo was planning on giving up. He says, after seeing this overwhelming difference between us, it's not strange for you to give up. All the dragons start to surround Jinwoo, and as the creatures get closer, Jinwoo activates a new ability that he had received. Seeing this, Antares understood what he was planning on doing. From the runestone that came out of Kamish is the skill that's the worst enemy of the dragon race. A roar from the soul that incapacitates everyone and drops them into despair, regardless of whether they're allies or foes. As Jinwoo uses the ability, all the dragons present in the area get affected by it, including Yogimont. As Antares was distracted by everything, Jinwoo appears next to him and grabbing his arm. He tells Antares to follow him. Jinwoo uses Shadow Exchange and starts to teleport away with Antares while Antares was thinking that he has done everything just for this moment. The scene shifts to the island where Jinwoo was staying with his Shadow Army. He had brought Antares with him to this location. Antares asks where they were, and Jinwoo tells him, this place is on the opposite side of the world from where your army is. Antares understands Jinwoo's whole plan and says, in an all-out war, your mana would have depleted much faster, so your plan to bring me here alone is an amazing strategy. Looking at the castle behind Jinwoo, Antares asks if it belongs to him, and Jinwoo tells him yes. Antares comments that considering it belongs to the Shadow Monarch, it's not that impressive. Jinwoo starts to prepare to fight, summoning his weapon, saying, I thought that the castle would be perfect to commemorate your death. Antares also starts to transform, saying, this fight would be about whether I can last until my troops find me or not. In the next second, a gigantic dragon is staring at Jinwoo and his shadow soldiers. And scenes shift Lady Selner, who was looking out the window, seeing the destruction caused by the army of dragons. Behind her was Director David, who was telling her that all kinds of mana were running wild and spreading throughout the region, that he says, "I never thought Hunter Jinwoo was telling the truth," and asks her what they are supposed to do now. Lady Selner tells him he's not the only hunter they have. The scene shifts to Thomas, who is destroying all the demons that were attacking the country. Lady Selner says hunters from all over the world have thrown themselves into the battle. Whether they're E rank or S rank, the ability of an E rank is slightly above that of a normal human. So other than the fact that they carry around magical weapons, they won't be able to contribute to the battle much, that it's not any different in the case of C rank and D rank. When an E rank hunts one beast, a D rank would be hunting 3 of them, and a C rank would be hunting around 10. This is even the case for S ranks. Even though they may be capable of killing 1,000 of them, they will eventually perish like just another one of the many stars. However, when those individual stars fall and draw shapes in the sky, although very faintly, they show us the future, and people call this hope. The story shifts to Korea, where someone is informing Woo that Jinwoo has succeeded in luring the demon to a nearby uninhabited island in Japan. While Woo was thinking about what Jinwoo had told him, that there is an uninhabited island tens of kilometers in size in which a gate of giants collapsed and an enormous amount of mana spread throughout its region, he wondered if that was the reason Jinwoo was hiding in that place all this time. The man asks Woo if they should dispatch some hunters there just in case, and Woo asks him, "Aren't all the S-rank hunters in the US right now? What kind of hunters would they send out?" He says they could send out E-rank hunters and tells the man, "If you knew that Hunter Jinwoo used to be an E-rank hunter in the past, you would know that it's possible for an E-rank hunter to become a hero." The story shifts to Jinwoo, who is fighting the monarch of destruction on the inhabited island. Jinwoo was flying around the massive beast on his wyvern, while the creature was charging up a fireball. But before he could do anything, his mouth was shut closed by a shadow soldier. As the creature looked at the one responsible, it sees its Bellion, who turned his sword into a whip to prevent him from using his fire. Seeing an opening, the giants also charged at the dragon and held it in place, preventing it from moving while Tusk was preparing a powerful magic attack. He threw the attack at the dragon, and as it landed, the creature screamed in pain. Not giving the creature any time to recover, Baru, along with Greed, leaped towards the dragon, using their lightning-fast speed to charge towards the monster and crash right into its face, slamming its head into the ground. By that time, Igris was also ready to deliver a strike on the monster's head. Using the lightning magic of the longsword, Igris electrocuted the monster, dealing a considerable amount of damage. Meanwhile, Jinwoo was in the air, observing his soldiers as they tried to take out the massive dragon. Looking at the damage they managed to deal, he thought, "It's working pretty well." But to everyone's shock, the creature started to smirk and said, "How amusing." The creature told Jinwoo that it liked where it overwhelmed the enemy with a significant difference in numbers, but it found the opposite situation quite amusing. Seeing this, Jinwoo was in disbelief. As the creature got back up on its feet, it used the ability of Dragon Fear and let out a massive roar, saying, "Allow me to show you the real thing." All of the shadows were affected by the wave and started to disintegrate. Seeing all of the shadows getting destroyed, Jinwoo thought, "I can't control my shadow soldiers like this," and canceled the summon. Before Jinwoo could recover from the attack, Antares was already in his face. The creature attacked using his fire breath. The attack was so powerful that it destroyed Kaisel in an instant and devastated the land in its path. As the dust settled, Antares was standing in front of the destruction and told Jinwoo, "This is the real thing." He continued by saying, "The avatar of destruction does not hesitate to sacrifice itself for the sake of raging war. I am the amalgam of blood, screams, madness, and destruction, a being created solely for the purpose of war. That is me, the king of dragons and the monarch of destruction." Seeing the destructive power of the monarch of destruction, Jinwoo thought, the enormous amount of mana from when the king of giants died must have sunk into the ground, and yet it didn't last against that attack. Even undying soldiers would perish immediately if they were to take a direct hit of his breath. As he was thinking, Terry started to turn back into his human form. He landed in front of Jinwoo, saying, "You do not have to be so nervous, Shadow Monarch. When you grabbed my arm, I could have easily broken free, but I did not because you impressed me by driving me into a corner. As a fellow monarch, I wanted to have a quiet conversation with you." He told Jinwoo, "If you have inherited the previous Shadow Monarch's memories, then you must already know this. Our ultimate enemy is not this world, but exists beyond the skies, the army of the rulers. Their only meaning in existence is to destroy the monarchs who were born within the darkness, and the Shadow Monarch is not an exception to this. I was planning on eliminating you and preparing to fight with them, but I've changed my mind after seeing how you fight. You possess a different set of talents compared to Ashbourne, and I saw our glorious victory within your talents." He told Jinwoo, "If you want me to let your family live, I will do so. If you want me to preserve your country, I will do so as well. And if you wish for me and my soldiers to depart from this land, I will leave quietly. Become the owner of this land, and I'm not talking about the castle in the hills. I mean the owner of the entire planet. You possess such qualifications." Reaching out to Jinwoo, he said, "All you have to do is hold my hand. If we combine forces to defeat the soldiers of the rulers, your family, your country, and this entire planet will regain peace and freedom. How about it, Shadow Monarch? Will you join me?" Hearing all that, Jinwoo told him, "Don't make me laugh. You expect me to believe you when your eyes are screaming that you want to kill me?" Looking at Jinwoo, who was prepared to fight, and Terry said, "I guess I can't hide it. This was my final mercy to you," and leaped towards Jinwoo. As his arm got close, it turned into a dragon's claw, but in the last second, Jinwoo jumped back and called Kaisel. While Antares was fully transforming, he attacked Jinwoo and Kaisel with his fire attack, but they managed to dodge the fire. Jinwoo ordered Kaisel to go downwards. As he got in range, he jumped towards the dragon's neck and slashed all the way down its throat, getting on top of Kaisel. He looked back at the creature, thinking, "That did not leave a single scratch." Antares told him, "You can't hurt me with something like that." He told Kaisel to get away from the creature, but all of a sudden, the monster used dragon fear, and Kaisel got affected by the ability. But before the dragon could attack, Kaisel grabbed Jinwoo using his tail and threw him far away from the range of the enemy attack. Jinwoo landed on his feet and looked at Kaisel. In the next second, Kaisel got hit by a massive fire breath, and Jinwoo was launched back by the force of the attack. A massive explosion covered the area. After the dust settled, they saw the attack was so powerful that it left a crater on the island. Antares said, "You probably won't die by something like that." Suddenly, a purple light leaped towards the creature's neck. It was Jinwoo, who managed to attach himself to the dragon. He thought, "The surface feels like magma," and attacked the creature using his dagger, but it had no effect as he was unable to penetrate the hard skin of the dragon. Suddenly, Jinwoo sensed the creature's claw coming straight towards him, so he leaped off before the attack could hit him. As he was doing that, he summoned his shadow soldiers, and Antares was surrounded by 3 dragons that started to attack him. Antares screamed out in pain as one of the dragons held him in place, while the remaining 2 started to attack him using their fire breath. Jinwoo was looking at the lizards fighting from a distance and thought, "Are the fires of the ancient dragons that Bellion used to lead ineffective against him? He's got unimaginable power and defense compared to everyone I've fought so far. I can't use my usual way to fight against the king of dragons." He starts to summon another power, saying, "I need stronger power, a power that can defeat an armored mountain with only my bare hands." All of a sudden, he gets surrounded by dark mana. Meanwhile, Antares managed to defeat all 3 of the dragons that Jinwoo summoned. He tells Jinwoo, "You're trying to defeat me with that lowly shadow." But as he looks towards Jinwoo, he gets terrified. Jinwoo was covered with massive dark energy, and seeing this, Antares wonders, what is this power that is going towards him? He asks Jinwoo, "What are you scheming again?" While Jinwoo was saying, I can use the power of the darkness to put on armor to make a bigger and sturdier dark armor, and make it so big that every living thing in the world could see it. The dark energy kept getting bigger and bigger until Antares looked like a small toy in front of it. Seeing this, Antares realized that this was astralization and said, "It's impossible," as the Shadow Monarch was originally one of the fragments of light. So, they shouldn't have any other form besides his original form. But how can his form be so enormous? He wondered if he summoned the power of death onto Earth. How did he do that? He was just a normal human up until recently. How was he able to control the power of death to this extent? Jinwoo looked towards his hands, thinking, "Is this me? This is the true strength that the Shadow Monarch Ashborn has left for me. From within my body, from the inside of this enormous body, I can feel an incredible and unimaginable amount of power endlessly flowing through me." Looking at Jinwoo standing in front of him, Antares says, "You are someone who has spent a lot of your life living in the realm of the living and the dead, and starts charging up an attack, thinking, so that's why the Shadow Monarch Ashborn was able to pass on such a power to a mere human. This human has been fighting a battle against himself all along, even before he received this power. So, for the sake of living, I must kill this person," shouting, "He's too dangerous." As the fire got close, Jinwoo didn't move. He started to raise his hand and launched a projectile from his hand that sliced through Antares' fire and hit him. He started to scream in pain, but that wasn't enough to take out the Monarch of Destruction. Both of them stood in front of each other, and the battlefield fell silent. In the next instant, they both leaped towards each other, and as they crashed, the impact created massive mana waves, destroying the ground beneath their feet. Antares started to stand on his two legs and towered over Jinwoo's massive form. He attacked using his claw, but Jinwoo managed to stop it before it could connect and punched him so hard that the impact created shockwaves. But Antares wasn't giving up. He bit Jinwoo on his side, lifted him up into the air, and threw him several feet into the sky. Jinwoo crashed down, destroying everything. As he lay on the ground, trying to recover from the impact, Antares attacked using his fire breath. Jinwoo got out of the way of the attack, but Antares managed to hit Jinwoo's arm, completely destroying it. Seeing this, Jinwoo started to summon a sword and charged towards the dragon. Seeing him coming, Antares used his fire breath, but Jinwoo managed to block it using the weapon and slashed the creature, cutting through the fire of the Monarch of Destruction. But Antares hit Jinwoo with his tail, launching him away and creating some distance between them. As Jinwoo stopped, he saw Antares lifted up in the air. He was out of Jinwoo's range of attack and started to charge up for a powerful attack. As he launched the attack, the impact covered a considerable amount of area. But from the dust, a dark spear appeared and destroyed Antares' wing. The creature screamed in pain. Before he could do anything, Jinwoo started to throw more of the projectiles towards the dragon, but Antares managed to stop them all using his fire breath. Both of them gave it their all, trying to overpower each other's attacks, but Antares was too powerful. He overpowered Jinwoo and managed to land a solid blow on him. As the dust cleared, the massive soldier started to disappear, and Jinwoo came out of the armor that was covering him. He landed and saw Antares towering over him in the dust. Seeing the situation, Jinwoo thought, "It takes an enormous amount of stamina just to maintain such a great power." Antares transformed back, saying, "This is my last offer. Do you really not intend to join me?" Jinwoo got back up, saying, "I don't intend on cooperating with a monster." Hearing that, Antares started to manifest a sword, saying, "How foolish." Both of them leaped towards each other, and Antares told Jinwoo that the Monarch of Transfiguration and the Army of Destruction is destroying your everything. In the end, you won't be able to protect anything. Even at this moment, while we are crossing swords, he tells Jinwoo, "Even if you are the king of the dead, as a human, you must fear death. Do you wish for the flame that even incinerates death itself to turn you into ashes?" Prematurely announcing his victory, Antares said, "Soon, Everything you are trying to protect will be nothing more than an illusion, and managed to disarm Jinwoo, saying, "Surely you must sense it since you have awakened the power of Ashbourne," and drove his sword through Jinwoo, saying, "The countless cries of suffering in this land and world." Jinwoo kicked him, creating distance between them while Antares was saying, "This is war. This is the sound of the army of destruction ravaging humanity. Listen to their cries of suffering." He placed his sword on Jinwoo's shoulder and said, "Let their despair become contagious and silence everyone. Regret your decision." But Jinwoo told him, "I should be the one saying that." As he failed to notice, the Kamish blade hovered in the air. The blade hit Antares and distracted him, while Jinwoo jumped back. But the blade failed to penetrate through the barrier that covered the monarch of destruction. That he asked Jinwoo, "You thought the dagger made out of a dragon's tooth could harm the king of dragons?" He asks, "Don't you find this amusing? A fight between a flame born within the darkness and a darkness born within the light. However, it seems this fight is nearing its end." Hearing that, Jinwoo agreed with him and told Antares, "I can see the end." Antares asked, "So did you decide that resistance is futile?" Jinwoo started to run towards him. Seeing him coming, Antares said, "The army of destruction doesn't even need to find this place, since I will raise their morale by beheading you, foolish monarch." As Jinwoo was running towards him, the sun started to rise, and Jinwoo said, "The sun darkens the shadows." Antares saw all of Jinwoo's strongest soldiers along with Jinwoo coming straight towards him. As the shadows held Antares in place, he shouted, "I will rip you to pieces and turn you into drake food. I will give you a miserable death for resisting against the king of dragons until the final moment." As he looked towards Jinwoo, he saw Jinwoo's father and Ashbourne, all three of them in Jinwoo. And the last thing he saw was a young Jinwoo as he slashed the monarch of destruction in two. In his final moments, Jinwoo asked, "I wonder if you can see your own death?"
And the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.
Hello guys, welcome back to another episode of Solo Leveling. We see the dagger that Jinwoo used to defeat Ashbourne was the one that belonged to his father. As the monarch of destruction was defeated, the sky started to crack. In his final moments, he said, "I didn't expect that one, but it shouldn't have been possible. I'm certain I didn't see a gate when I first arrived here. An enormous amount of energy would have been required to connect the two worlds. So how is the ruler's army here?" As countless numbers of soldiers started to descend from the sky, Antares asked, "Were you aiming for this the entire time? To distort space with the clash of great powers, bringing your allies from the other world here? The reason you distracted the army and the reason you brought me here? I simply thought it was because you wanted to have an undisturbed fight, but there's no way you could have communicated with the rulers." Jinwoo told him, "There was a way. The vessels of the rulers, the vessels that they lend powers to, were still here." Hearing that, Antares understood everything, and looking at the sky, he said, "Is that so? You used the vessels to prepare a gate to this place. You found a way to win the war, even if you were to lose the battle. It's my complete loss for only looking at the smaller battle." Jinwoo asked him, "It was you who ordered the monarch of white flames and the beast monarch to attack the shadow monarch?" Antares asked if it was the monarch of white flame who told him this, and Jinwoo flipped him off, saying, "Ashbourne wanted me to send you his regards." Seeing this, Antares gets furious, and as he is about to attack Jinwoo, he gets impaled by the soldiers of the rulers. As he looks up, he sees the brightest fragment of luminosity hovering in the air. Seeing him, Antares says, "The world is covered by such bright light and such dark shadows. I didn't have any chance of winning from the start." As he starts to disintegrate in the air, he says, "I shall wait within the true eternal rest, not the illusionary eternal rest that you created. I shall meet you again there." Jinwoo replies by saying, "Don't worry, I'll see you again soon enough." The brightest fragment lands in front of him, saying, "You've ended our war. I don't know how I could ever show my appreciation." Hearing that, Jinwoo tells the fragment, I don't know if this could be called showing your appreciation, but I do have a request, and it's something only you can do for me. The fragment tells Jinwoo, I will do everything within my power to aid you. Jinwoo asks him if he can use the cup of reincarnation just once more. Hearing that, all the fragments fall silent, and the brightest fragment asks Jinwoo if he just asked whether he can use the cup of reincarnation to turn back time. That he explains that even if you turn back time using the cup, the consciousness of the monarchs will still remain. You'd still do it, even though the deceased monarchs would come back to life with their memories from this life intact. Jinwoo tells him that's what he is planning on doing and asks the fragment not to send anyone to Earth at that time, as he will take care of the monarchs and their armies by himself. In the dimensional gap, the fragment says, you are willingly taking on the entire war all by yourself, and asks Jinwoo the reason for doing that, as they had used the cup many times, but this is the best result they have gotten yet. Looking at his father's blade, Jinwoo says, I lost too many people in this battle, and I want to bring them back. The fragment warns him that the durability of the cup has almost been exhausted. If you were to fail this time, you won't be able to turn back time again, he says. If you stop now, you could be remembered as the hero who stopped the invasion of the monarchs and forever be remembered by the people. However, no one will be able to remember the fight you are getting into now. After hearing everything, Jinwoo closes his eyes and thinks about everyone who is close to him, his family and friends, and gets back up saying, I will go back in time. Hearing that, the fragment says, you want to save not just a portion of the world, but the entire world with your own hands. You're able to carry on everything by yourself reminds me of Ashbourne, your predecessor. The fragment says, I understand and I wish you the best of luck, but Jinwoo stops him, asking about the shadows and what would happen to the shadow soldiers who did not exist in the past. The fragment tells him, the beings which overlap with the past would perish, and the beings which do not will remain. After hearing that, Jinwoo tells him, I'm ready now. The fragment summons the cup, saying, may your courage save your world. The place starts to light up, and the light slowly covers that part of the planet, seen by everyone from around the world. After some time, the light started to fade away, and the story shifts to Jinwoo's apartment building, where his mother is asking Jaina to wake Jinwoo up. That we see Jaina as a child, who is asking Jinwoo to wake up. Looking at Jinwoo, she says, you're already up? As Jinwoo got out of his room, he saw his mother cooking in the kitchen. She was healthy and not sick anymore. On the side, he saw his father reading the newspaper. Seeing all of them like this, tears started to fall from his eyes, and everyone asked him why he was acting like this all of a sudden. Jinwoo tells them, I think I just had a nightmare. Seeing his family happy, he thinks, my nightmare is over, and now I'm with my younger sister, my mother who's healthy, and my father who didn't disappear. I was given the last chance to set everything right, and says, I won't lose this opportunity. I can now rewrite the future that is to come. But just for a little, isn't it okay for me to treasure this peace that I'm feeling as a reward for myself? I know that beyond the skies, there are monarchs preparing humongous gates to attack us right now. But for just a little while longer, if this time that I'm enjoying wouldn't cause harm to anyone, then I would like to stay here and enjoy it for a day longer. Fast forward, we see Jinwoo's mother doing the housework, and she sees a note on the table. On the note, Jinwoo wrote, I'll come back after I'm done with what I need to do. The scene shifts, and we see Baru, who had just taken out a monster, along with Bellion, who was sitting in front of a pile of dead demons. We see two entities standing between all the carnage as someone says, this empty world that has nothing but endless darkness feels extremely lonely if there isn't any fighting. It was Jinwoo and Yogimut. Jinwoo says, I managed to win the fight against the Monarchs and killed the Monarch of Transfiguration, who was at the core of everything. And so it has been 27 years since I've entered the dimensional crack. But it looks like the long and dreary fight is finally coming to an end soon. The only remaining enemies are the Dragon Emperor and his direct soldiers, the Bridge of Destruction. As he sits surrounded by countless dead monsters, he thinks, I'm glad that time flows differently in the outside world compared to here. Around 2 years have passed in the outside world. He thinks, meeting everyone again after 2 years, I wonder how father and mother are doing. How much would Jaina have changed? Should I wait for her to grow up more before I explain what happened to her? As he was thinking, Bellion approached Jinwoo, saying, "We have finished things up here. There are no more enemies that are still breathing." Hearing that, Jinwoo stood up and used shadow extraction on all of the defeated enemies. Along with Baru and Bellion, he prepared to go after the remaining monarchs. The scene shifts, and we see the monarch of destruction sitting on his throne as one of his henchmen informs him that the monarch of transfiguration has been defeated and asks if they should move somewhere further from where they are. Antares tells the creature, "I'm tired of running away. We will fight with him here." He comments, "The Shadow Monarch is truly amazing. I didn't expect him to use the cup of reincarnation to turn back time." As he was doing that, a shadow started to appear in front of his throne, and Antares says, "To think I'd meet you again, alive and breathing. But it's time for one of us to rest in peace for eternity." Getting up from his throne, Antares says, "I'm Antares, the second Shadow Monarch. What is your name?" He replies, "My name is Sung Jinwoo," and asks if he has anything else to say. Antares, standing in between his army, says, "No," and both of them leap toward each other, followed by their armies that charge in for the final battle. The scene shifts back to the real world, where 2 years had passed. Due to what some fortune tellers said, the entirety of America was shaken. She told the media that the one who's about to bring doom will soon descend upon this land. Normally, this prophecy wouldn't have received any attention. However, the problem was that Norma Selner was the one who gave this prophecy in her interview. She said, "The one who is about to descend on this land along with an infinite number of soldiers of death. We won't be able to escape from death. There's no way for us to escape from him." We are told that 2 years ago, she, who was suddenly enlightened, had predicted the death of the North Korean dictator, the terrorist kidnapping of passengers, and the crash of the stock market due to the huge crash of the real estate industry. Numerous prophecies of hers have been accurate and have caused her to be at the center of a lot of controversies. And now she suddenly says that the world will come to an end. Of course, everyone would be in shock. The story shifts to the next day, where, in the skies of Seoul, a huge black hole that covered almost the whole sky had appeared. After that, Selner's prophecy made the headlines in all of the newspapers in the world. The people gathered under the gigantic gate, waiting to see what would come out of it. All of a sudden, the gate started to break, but nothing happened. Seeing this, people were wondering why the gate was empty. We saw a figure standing behind the crowd. It was Jinwoo, and someone had been waiting for his arrival with flowers in his hands. It was a fragment of brilliant light, and he tells Jinwoo, "We're glad you've returned safely. Welcome back, Jinwoo, or should I call you the Shadow Monarch?" He says, "I didn't expect you to appear in the form of a middle schooler." Jinwoo tells him, "It's because people might have been scared if I came out with a full bearded face." He says, "It doesn't feel bad to have at least one person welcoming me back." The fragment tells him, "We really didn't think that you'd be able to make it back after trying to take care of everything alone. But right now I see that your steps carry the weight of 10,000 soldiers." Jinwoo asks the fragment, "I'm sure you're not here just to give me a flower bouquet," and asks, "What business does the envoy of the rulers have with me?" The fragment tells Jinwoo, "The rulers have a message for you. This might be a long conversation. Shall we move to another location to talk?" Jinwoo tells him he has a place in mind that he'd like to drop by. Fast forward, we see both of them sitting inside an ice cream shop. The fragment asks him the reason for choosing this place, and Jinwoo tells him, "After being in a place where there's nothing for so long, it is natural that one would like to eat something sweet." He asks the fragment, "What did the rulers say?" He tells Jinwoo they would like to thank you as usual. Hearing that, Jinwoo tells him to forget the formalities. Is there a problem? The fragment tells Jinwoo that the reason for him being there was that all of the problems had been resolved. The rulers are worried about your power, which can influence the direction of the world. As you know, the power that you possess is not something that the world is ready for. Jinwoo asks him why he was telling him all this, and the fragment tells him This world that doesn't even have mana is way too weak. Which is why, if you're okay with it, we're wondering if you'd mind moving to another world that's ready to accept your power. Hearing everything, Jinwoo tells the fragment, instead of doing something that's such a pain in the ass, like moving me to another world, there's also the option of just sealing me completely. The fragment replies by saying, of course, that's possible too. But all of a sudden, his expression changes in horror as he sees Jinwoo. After hearing his answer, he asks the fragment, now that I no longer have any use, are you guys getting rid of me just because you're afraid of the powers that I possess? The fragment, scared, starts to reach into his pocket, saying, that's definitely not it, and bringing out his phone, asks Jinwoo to read the article. Jinwoo sees Lady Selner telling the people about the one who would be descending on this land to bring destruction to this world. The fragment tells Jinwoo that before you came back, Selner had created an uproar with her prophecy. He explains that back when Jinwoo disappeared, she wasn't such a powerful fortune teller, but after coming into contact with our world, her life has changed. Jinwoo asks if him coming back was the reason for the change that made her power stronger. The fragment says, yes, that is the reason. Hearing everything, Jinwoo asks the fragment if they could talk again another time about this instead, and the fragment gets back up, saying, I will do just that, calling him the Great Monarch. After he leaves, Jinwoo starts to think about everything. If every living organism has a fixed purpose for their existence, then one thing's for sure. I, who became the Shadow Monarch and stopped the world's odd phenomena and the monarchs with my strength, have completed my mission. I've fulfilled my purpose, but a great amount of power that has served its purpose is a pain to deal with. Just like nuclear materials that have reached the end of their lifespan, that if that's the case, would I now become an existence that this place does not need anymore? As he was thinking, he noticed a girl passing by the shop, and seeing her, Jinwoo's eyes widened. He rushed out of the shop, thinking the time would come when the question of whether it's okay for me to remain in this place will be answered, while the girl is thinking, did ice cream also smell so good? Jinwoo remembers everyone for whom he fought against the enemy all by himself, saying, if there's a reason to remain in this place, then it's probably that there are still people that I love in this place, and that people who love me are still here. Which is why that's enough reason for me to stay. I'll stay here and find other reasons as to why I shouldn't leave. As the girl turns towards him, he sees that it's Sha, and they both stare at each other. The series ends. Please give it a